How you doing, Pastor?
Hey, doing great. What's on your heart?
Well, I know you've answered this, but I still hear a lot of pastors that claim we can fall from grace.
Yes.
Can you elaborate?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, it's interesting. We were just talking about twisted scripture. That is one of the chapters. One of the lies is that we can fall from grace and lose our salvation. Now, typically when we hear the phrase fall from grace, I mean, in today's world, that's when so-and-so in the media, either a politician or a Hollywood star or someone else, a TV personality, was so moral and so ethical and living such a great life, and then they had a fall from grace and did something real bad. So typically, that's what we might gravitate toward when we hear the expression fallen from grace. But in the Bible, well, Mike, in the Bible, falling from grace means something totally different. It's not about your good behavior that suddenly went bad. It is about falling away from God's grace and falling toward a legalistic message. In this case, 2,000 years ago, a message of trying to get right and stay right with God through what you do, namely in the Jewish law. And so Paul tells us when he talks about those who've fallen from grace in Galatians, he's saying that they are, quote, seeking to be justified by works, seeking to be justified by the law, he says. And so when we hear him say that, that is not a Christian. A Christian is not a person who is seeking to get right with God through their law-based works. If we're seeking to get right with God that way, then we are not born-again believers. Born-again believers know good and well that rightness with God is a free gift, that we are saved by grace through faith. It is not of ourselves. It is a gift of God, so nobody can brag about what they're doing. And so Paul is saying in Galatians that these people are seeking to be justified by the law, and they are severed from Christ. What does that mean? Cut off from, or void of. Literally, the word there in the original Greek means void of Christ. So it's not that they were saved and then God decided to get out his pocket knife and cut them off. No, these people, in choosing to try to get right with God by law-based living, they are void of Christ. You cannot look to the law and look to Jesus at the same time. And so by looking to the law to get right, they are cut off or void or devoid of Jesus Christ. Why? Because a person has to give up on a self-improvement law-based program in order to recognize salvation by grace. That's why. So what Paul is addressing in the book of Galatians is not a bunch of Christians who somehow sinned one too many times and God got tired of them and let them go. No, that's not what we see. What we see are these Galatians who are riding the fence. They're not so sure about this Jesus thing. And then somebody comes along behind the Apostle Paul after the Apostle Paul is done teaching them the truth. These Judaizers come in and say, isn't that great what Paul said? But, isn't that great what Paul said? But you better add in the Jewish law. Oh, it's great that you'll be a born-again Christian, but how about you be a super Christian? You can mix Jesus and Moses and hit the next level, man. You can level up like in a video game. And these guys were suckers for the sales pitch of lifeless, law-based religion. And that's why they're cut off, void of Christ, and are not justified because they were going about it the wrong way. That's what it means to hear the message of grace and maybe entertain it a second, flirt with it, but ultimately fall away from it and be a sucker for the sales pitch of lifeless religion instead. Not Christians losing something. These are unbelievers who were never saved in the first place. Mike, I hope that gives you some clarity on the book of Galatians and also on that phrase right there in Galatians 5:4. You have fallen from grace, been severed from Christ. You are void of Him.